Hey leaders, welcome to the Mountaintop Leadership. This is the month of February and I'm excited to bring you this content on the second Monday of the month. Today we are talking about what true leadership looks like. Today we are asking the question of what does it look like to be a real, effective, centered, biblical leader? And I love one of my favorite definitions of leadership, or how you can understand leadership, is just this line: leadership is influence. And so you may be thinking, I don't really care about my leadership, or I don't have hardly any leadership. Well, if you look at the influence that you could have in the opportunities that you have to lead, that influence means something, right? And so as leaders, as influencers, we are called to do things well and excellently. And that's what these videos are about. And that's what I'm trying to do as I lead, is to really build this craft of leadership as a team and as individuals as we lead in the capacities that we have influence in. And so we're going to be talking about 4 different points of what true leadership looks like. And number 1 is, first of all, you have to want it, right? You must have a purpose. You must have a core center that you are going towards. And that's the first point today. A true leader is centered. A true leader is centered. And you may be thinking, what does centered mean, right? How do we conceptualize centered? What does that mean by definition? And it's funny because if you've been under a centered leader, you know the difference between a centered leader and a not centered leader, an uncentered leader. And Craig Rochelle, he gives 3 different qualities that are found in centered leaders, and we're going to go through those real quick and look at them in our aspects of our ministry here at the church. And so he says a centered leader, listen to this, a centered leader is guided by values, driven by purpose, and obsessed with mission. Guided by values. What does that mean? Last month we talked about the 5, right? I have this piece of paper that has the points on it that we talked about last week, but it's called the 5, and that's what we decided to call our core values. And there's 5 different things that we hold on to closely that matter to us, so that when we are walking our path, when we're leading, when we're influencing the people that are under our leadership, we can guide ourselves by those values. Otherwise, we'll stray off, right? Otherwise, we'll get off the path. But if we set up those values, we can stay centered. And for us, for our student leadership, that's the 5. Number 2, a centered leader is driven by purpose. At the beginning of last year, when we started the fall, we started with a series called How to Be Real. I think it was actually the second series, but how to be real. What does it mean to be a real Christian? And one of the weeks we talked about the importance, the significance of understanding and knowing our why, right? Our purpose. We're driven by purpose as people. And as leaders, we need to remember, we need to be driven by our purpose, our core purpose. And I strongly encourage you as a leader, if you have not looked into your why, as why you're a part of the student ministry, why you're a part of this church, I would so encourage you to write down your why. Think about it, pray about it. And sometimes when you're leading and you lose sight of that purpose, and you're like, man, I don't feel momentum. I don't feel like I have any purpose. You can go back to that why, you can read it, and you can allow God to inspire you through that purpose that you have written down. So a centered leader is guided by values, driven by purpose, and obsessed with mission. That's the 3rd one. And what does this mean? Obsessed with mission. This means you're passionate about your purpose, right? Some people, passion looks different in different types of people. Kayla is passionate through her emotions, through her outward expressions. And for me, I'm more passionate in what I do. It's more of like hands and feet kind of thing only. I don't express myself as outwardly as she does. And you may be either one of those, or maybe a blend in the middle. But the idea is that we all express passion differently, but it all has the same result, right? It's all action. It's not just words, it's not just talk. It's actually what we do. And if we're obsessed with our mission, we're passionate people, we can be a centered leader. So we're guided by values, driven by purpose, and obsessed with mission. And that's what a true leader looks like when we talk about being centered. They're guided by values, driven by purpose, and obsessed with mission. Okay, number two, a true leader. We said a true leader, number one, a true leader is centered. And number two, a true leader is a great follower. A true leader is a great follower. And you may be like, well, I guess that kind of makes sense. I guess if we just say it, it sounds cool. A true leader is a great follower. But if you want somebody to look at in your life and in my life that is a great follower who's also a leader, it's our pastor, John Adams. He is a great follower because he knows how to encourage. He knows how to get behind someone else's vision for what they have. And I so admire that about him. And it's something that as true leaders we are called to exhibit. We are called to be great followers as leaders. And if you're following, there's something that you have to do when you follow, and that's listen. You cannot lead, you cannot follow without listening, and you can't listen when you're too busy. And I know a lot of us have a lot going on. Some of us have kids, some of us are working really full jobs that require a lot of time outside of the office or outside of the building, whatever. But we have to realize that busyness can be the enemy of greatness. Right? If we're too busy, if we can never pour into what we're called to or what's important to us because we're so busy with so many things because we have a problem saying no, then we can really miss out on the greatness that we could be producing, the excellence that we could be producing. And so this idea of being a great follower. We have to be able to listen well to what others are saying, and sometimes it's hard to do that when we're so busy. But listening, what the culture says, listening makes you weak. You can see this on social media, right? If you're listening to what somebody's actually saying, you stand out, right? That's something that does not happen a lot. Listening does not make you weak, though. It makes you wise. And if we would actually listen to each other, especially if you think about it in the context of student ministry, when a student comes in, we have to be willing to listen. And a true leader is a great follower. And a beautiful example of this is in John chapter 5, verse 19. Jesus is talking, and he says, I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. He does only what he sees the Father doing. Jesus is following the Father. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. And in the same way, we are called to follow Jesus' example. And we're called to be great followers as true leaders. Number 3, a true leader has a balance of confidence, competency, and character. And I know this is a lot of content, so I'd encourage you to write it down if you can. But a true leader has a balance of confidence, competency, and character. And what does that look like? I want to read a parable from Matthew chapter 25 talking about confidence. What does our confidence look like as a true leader? How do we balance that? So Matthew 25, 14 through 30. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's giving them an illustration of what the coming of the Son of Man will be like. And we're going to start in verse 14 of chapter 25. This is what it says. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So the guy with 5 talents, and we see the guy with 2 talents actually did the same thing. They both invested. They both took what the master had given them, and they multiplied it. But then we see that the servant that received 1 talent, in verse 18 it says, but he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. And we're going to find out why he did that in just a second. Verse 19. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing the 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And we see that the man with 2 talents comes back and does the same thing. But then the guy with 1 talent, who took his master's money and buried it. He, in verse 24, it says, He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours. And the master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. So it's obviously not what the master wanted him to do. And what's interesting about the story is that we're talking about confidence, right? The servant that was given 5 and that was given 2, those 2 men knew who the servant was. They were confident in who he was, and so they took the money that they were given and they multiplied it and they gave it back to the master, and the master was joyful. He said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, so I will set you over much." And that's how the master responded. They knew their master. But then the man with 1 talent was deeply conflicted. He was afraid of his master. He didn't take what God had given him and out of confidence of who his master was, do anything with it. He lacked confidence in who God was. And so the balance of our confidence, what this looks like as a true leader, our confidence comes from above, right? Our confidence as leaders comes from our belief and conviction of who God is. And so we can't be deeply conflicted about who God is if we want to truly lead in confidence. We have to know who he is so we can know who we are and be confident in our leadership. We're going to talk about competency and character now, and I want to talk about this illustration that I heard a few years ago that was very helpful. And if you think about it on a chart that has 4 different areas, competency on this side and character on this side, and what happens a lot of times is that we may focus on one and forget about the other, or we try to lead out of, if we say, "Oh, well, I'm a good person, like I have good qualities that we're going to talk about as having good character. I have good character, so I'll be okay." Well, actually, as true leaders, like, we're called to balance competency, which is like how we, like, our skills and our abilities with our character. And when you combine those two, when you're right in the middle, when it's a beautiful thing when you balance competency and character. And competency we're defining as skills and abilities, right? We need to get better. We need to confront reality. We need to listen first, keep commitments, and extend trust. These are some examples of how we can be competent in our leadership. And I know that was a lot of different things, but there have been many studies, and you can go online and look at these, but studies have shown that when we put our attention and efforts into improving our strengths, we grow at an accelerated rate. We grow at an exponential rate compared to when we try to enhance our weaknesses. And so when we think about competency, think about the things that you're gifted at. Think about the things that you're really good at. Maybe that's your sense of humor. Maybe that's just connecting and being empathetic. These skills and abilities that God has given us, He's called us to enhance our strengths. And sometimes, I know in my life, I tend to spend more time on my weaknesses and trying to fix my weaknesses so then I don't have these strengths that are really built up. And as true leaders, we are called to balance this competency and our character. And in our competency and our skills, we need to focus on our strengths and really enhance those, because when we do that, we grow exponentially. And then our character. This is our integrity. This is really important. Our integrity, our initiative, or our intent. And how do we build character? How do we balance that? I think a beautiful illustration of character is showing honor. And showing honor starts with genuine compassion for others, right? We need to choose transparency. We need to right the wrongs. This is what character looks like. It looks like integrity, filled ministry, filled leadership. And, when we let God's Spirit in us, when we let His Spirit convict us and help us repent and move forward, we can build upon a foundation of what we've learned, right? Through our character, when we have integrity, when we show honor, when we choose transparency, we can learn from our mistakes, we can layer our lessons, and we can build up, we can become better leaders. And so as a true leader, we have to balance confidence, competency, and character. And this is the last one, if you made it this far. Virtual high five. 4th point, this is the last one. We said a true leader is centered. A true leader is a great follower. A true leader has a balance of confidence, competency, and character. And number 4, a true leader has compassion. Compassion, I believe this with all my heart, compassion brings breakthrough. This is something that God is working with me on. Compassion brings breakthrough. Our heart's engagement, listen to this, our heart's engagement in the feelings and situations of others produces breakthrough in our hearts with understanding, and breakthrough in their hearts in our expression of Christ's love and sympathy for us. And so what does this mean? We know how to be compassionate because Christ was compassionate towards us. But when we extend a hand, when we extend our hearts, our cares towards another person through compassion, that breaks down so many walls. I know when I've heard of leaders, I've seen it in my own life, in my leadership, when we are compassionate with students and we care about what they're going through, those walls come down and God is able to use us because He's loved us. That's how we know how to love. He's able to use us in a way to love them and be compassionate towards them. And so true leadership is not easy, and I know this was a lot of content, but that's on purpose because true leadership is not easy, but it is important. And as a centered follower who's balancing confidence, competency, and character, and who's compassionate, this is what God is calling us to as leaders. And I know you may think you don't have a lot of influence, but you do. And I have to remind myself of that what God has entrusted us with, what God has given us in our lives, we are called to walk out excellently. And so in our leadership, as we have influence, as we influence others, we are called to be true leaders. And so I will be praying for you all this month. I will be praying for myself that we can strive towards this goal of being true leaders for Christ so that others can come to know Him. Have a great month, everybody.